wherever you go, however you go. For energy on the go, it's gotta be 5-Hour Energy. It works fast, it works long, it tastes good, and with 0 sugar and 4 calories, there's nothing holding you back. Fits your pocket, fits your backpack, fits your on-the-go life, whether you're going to work, going on vacation, or just going out with friends. 5-Hour Energy. Energy on the go. For more information, visit 5hourenergy.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome everyone to a new episode of Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. It is Saturday, February the 2nd, 2019. I'm your host, Scott Thomas Outler, and I want to thank you for joining me here this evening. We'll be live for the next hour, and coming up, I'm looking forward to talking in the next segment with the guest tonight, Beth Hermes, who is a local Georgia author. I've had the pleasure of talking with her on a few occasions at different events around the Atlanta area, including the one that she hosts called A Novel Idea, which I read at last month. And so we'll be talking to her about that event and how it came about, along with the series of books that she authors and is currently working on, and the workshops that she has available here in the Atlanta area as well, along with much more. Before we get to that, I do have just a few brief notes about recent goings-on that I'd like to mention. Firstly, I want to say thank you to Sunil Sharma at Setu Magazine, which is a bilingual literature and arts journal published out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Sunil approached me recently asking if I would come on board as a guest editor for a special Western Voices edition that will be coming out in the near future, which I certainly agreed to do and have received some excellent submissions to that Western Voices edition so far, and would like to say if there are any poets out there who are interested in submitting, please do swing by 17numa.com. That's my website, where a recent post has the full details and guidelines for what we're looking for. So please check that out and send some poems my way. And if there's anyone else that you think might be interested in contributing, please do spread the word to them as well. That is much appreciated. On another note, I also wanted to take a moment in memory of my father. Yesterday was actually the 5-year anniversary of his passing back in 2014, and so a lot of good memories have been in my heart and mind here over the last several days, spending time with family and recollecting on the great life that he led and the great man that he was. I recently had a poem published in a journal called Credo Esquire, and they invited the contributors to take part in a special edition that they're going to be putting together, where each author has the opportunity to write an essay on a topic of their choosing. And with that in mind, and it coinciding with this anniversary, I took the opportunity to write an essay about my father. And so I wanted to say thank you to the editorial board at Credo Esquire for giving me that opportunity, because writing can often be a cathartic process. And so being able to go through some of those thoughts and get them put out into a dedication to my father Barry was really a good experience for me. And I also had a poem published in a recent anthology put out by Alien Buddha Press. It has a poem I wrote about 6 months after his passing, and I've never sent it out to any other journal before because I think that the content was still too poignant for me up until recently, and it just feels as if a cycle of some sort has been shifting within me lately, and I'm able to express those things more freely. And also it's helping me move into a place where I can start writing about him more, and I'm looking forward to doing that here in the near future. A lot of good stories about him are starting to arise, which I'm very thankful for. So, rest in peace, Dad. We love you, and you're missed. So, also want to mention that if you are listening to this show through Blog Talk Radio, please do hit the follow button there on the screen where you're listening. You can get in the loop for upcoming shows and can also find an archive of some of the past guests who have been on, including most recently Adam Levon Brown, who is the publisher at Madness Muse Press. He was on last week, so I want to thank him as well for coming on. That archive to past shows of Songs of Selah can also be found at my website, 17numa.com. Speaking of past guests, Peter Rowitz is the front man for a local Atlanta band called Spectralux, and this song is off of their upcoming album, which will be out later this year. I'm going to play this, and then we will be back with tonight's guest, Beth Hermes, right after the break. Thank you.
Selah. That was a piece called Summer's End by Lux. And coming up next on the show, I'm going to invite Beth Hermes on. I'd like to read a brief introduction about her. A graduate of Auburn University's School of Journalism, Beth Hermes has been a professional writer for more than 30 years, with articles published in numerous magazines, newspapers, and online publications. As a freelance writer, she has created award-winning marketing campaigns for individuals, corporations, and nonprofit organizations. Since 2009, Beth has shared her gift of storytelling as a writing coach, teaching creative writing classes and business writing workshops. She encourages her creative writers to share their work through critique workshops and the publication of an anthology consisting entirely of short stories and poems written by her students. Her business writing workshops focus on developing clear messages to enhance personal and business success. Her instruction also includes journaling and strengthening the creative muscle. Beth is the author of a spiritual fantasy fiction series called The Light Bearers. She is currently at work on the 7th book in the projected 11-book series and is working on a memoir and a collection of prompts and ideas from her numerous writing workshops and classes. In 2017, Beth and her husband, Craig, fulfilled a lifelong dream to own a farm. They live with their college student son, Benjamin, her horse, a rescue dog, a cat, a rabbit, and a few dozen chickens. Their daughter, Abigail, is a professional artist and art instructor. All right. Beth, are you there?
I am. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you this Saturday evening?
Doing great. Thank you. It was a beautiful day.
Yeah, it really was. The weather is far from predictable these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just glad it wasn't cold again.
I can agree with you there. So, talking about what you just wrote there at the end of your bio about living on a farm and speaking about the weather,
Yeah.
how does that affect things through the winter when you're
well,
trying to...
for the last 2 weeks, I've been less writer and more of chicken protector with the typhoon-type weather that we've had. I spend a lot of time making sure that the chickens aren't drowning. So that's been really fun. And, tromping around in boots with mud caked all over them. So, that's been wonderful. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, it's a lot of fun to be on a farm, but I much prefer the warmer and sunnier weather to the typhoon stuff we've had lately.
That's definitely understandable. I think looks like we're going to have some good weather here for the next foreseeable future, hopefully. So
Yeah,
see how that
yeah.
goes. Did you do an event in Atlanta at the Foxtail Bookshop last night?
Foxtail Bookshop. Yep, we did. We had 8 authors come out. It's a lot of fun. We do this once a quarter, and a lot of they're local authors, mostly self-published, a few traditionally published, and we don't restrict the genre. So we had everything from books about dogs. There was one book by a dog, which was really interesting, or his owner actually was the ghostwriter, but the dog supposedly wrote the book. We had a gentleman whose dad was a Holocaust survivor, and he discovered a suitcase in a closet when he was young, and then when his dad passed away, he actually used the contents to write a memoir, which was beautiful.
Oh, wow.
We just had a really interesting group of stories last night, and every last one of them was just, it was, beyond what you would imagine from first-time or small published authors.
Very cool. How long have you been hosting that event, and how did you get involved with Foxtail Bookshop?
Actually, I'm glad that you asked that. It was funny. I went to Marietta. I've been hosting it for about 3 years. I actually took that project on when one of the other folks who had been hosting it had too much on their plate, so I took it on. And it's been a lot of fun to put that together. I love working with new authors. But I've been working with Foxtail since 2009. I had gone to a workshop, a publishing workshop, at a little book event in downtown Marietta earlier that year, and Foxtail had a tent there. And when I passed by, they recognized me because I worked for one of the then local news magazines that was out. as a freelancer. And they asked me if I wanted to teach a class. And I said, that would be fun. What do you want me to teach? And they said, whatever you want. So I went through several writing books that I had, and one of my favorites was Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones. She's a poet. I'm sure you've probably heard of her, and really gifted, and she runs workshops all over the country. And so I loved the book. I created a curriculum from it and taught that workshop and for 6 weeks. And it was so popular that they asked me to come back, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's great. So when they asked you that first time, you had never taught a workshop before then? Were you kind of thrown into the fire there?
I had never taught a creative workshop. I've taught, my career has been kind of crazy, like everybody's had, at some point or another. And I had taught real estate licensees for a developer, a national developer, at conferences up in Ohio for several years. So I knew I could instruct people. And then I also have taught business people how to write really good business content so that their websites or their 1 minutes or whatever they do when they're speaking with someone is very clear. So the creative stuff is something that I'm really interested in. So when I was asked to do the creative writing workshop, I jumped at the chance because that's my passion. I love to do that. And just the joy on people's faces, I call it light bulb moments, when people discover that they can write something that inspires someone else. That just keeps me going. I love that.
That is such a beautiful feeling when someone has work that touches another person and you know that you're connecting on that human level.
Absolutely.
And your words have meaning, and it's so I dig that.
Yeah.
You say that the creative aspect is where your passion is at. So how did that work out, going to school at Auburn for journalism? Where did that path take you, and how did it ultimately get to the point where you are now, where you're writing the fantasy fiction series and really letting your mind
I had always wanted to be a novelist.
Work?
Yeah, I had always wanted to be a novelist. From the time I was a little kid, I was making up stories. And Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, and I've taught that program a couple of times as well, she always calls writers and creatives who are in fields that are considered safe, like a writer might become a journalist, or a singer might go into producing or something like that. She calls those shadow artists. So I spent many, many years as a shadow artist, working in PR and journalism. And when I finally had the chance to stretch my own creative muscle, I realized that I had been putting myself on the back burner for many, many years. So it was an eye-opening moment for me, but it also, I think you draw from every experience. I don't believe that those were time wasters in any sense of the word. Those experiences working for companies and so forth really strengthened my view of being able to interview people and to understand what makes people tick. And when I worked for the newspapers, and even for the magazines doing freelance stuff, I would talk to folks, and I did a lot of what they call lifestyle pieces. So I didn't do hard news. And so when I found out what really lit people up, I think it gave me a sense of creating characters, because everybody is a character in their own story. And so I use a lot of those experiences with interviewing people to create characters, or interview characters that live in my head, if you will, to star in my books.
I can really identify with what you're saying there about learning from the interviews, because that's sort of the process I'm in here in the early stages of this show, bringing people on and trying to sort of develop these skills and learn about what the right questions to ask and keep the conversation going on a thread and all those sorts of things. So it's been an interesting process, and I wonder if maybe you have a little bit more insight into when you were working on that lifestyle page and interviewing people, some of the maybe lessons that you learned about the interviewing process and just how to get the most out of people and tap into the story that they have to tell.
Yeah, I think and I call it, really watching for those words that people use, that their expression changes or their posture changes when they use certain words or they talk about certain things that they're interested in. When you can identify those things, that's what makes that person really light up. Everybody in a job is supposed to talk about X, Y, and Z. But when you get around that and you hear what really interests them, that's when the interview process becomes fun. And so I think that being able to identify that in real people, I know what people enjoy, what they like to talk about, what they like to think about, what they like to do in their spare time, and that translates to a whole lot of things. It also helps me with my writing students because, they think they should be writing about whatever is on the bookshelves right now and on the New York Times bestseller list or all that. But I always tell them, what do you like to read and what do you like to write about? And a lot of times it isn't what's on a bestseller list. And I said, that's a great thing. So I think it helps, when you can communicate, you identify what lights people up, and then you encourage them to open up more about that, whether I'm doing the interview or I'm teaching them how to write and express themselves. I think that's it. And it's really just a matter of paying attention. One of my favorite sayings is that silent and listen are made of the same letters. And so I've really trained myself when I'm interviewing someone to leave the white space in our interviews and let them fill in the pauses if they feel they need to.
Right. That's something you said there about teaching your students to really tap into what it is they want to say, because if you're chasing after what's on the New York Times bestseller, by the time that you catch up to it, it's probably going to have looped into another fad or the next phase, so might as well be true to yourself the whole time and bring forth what it is.
Right. Trends have to start somewhere, so, be the trendsetter, don't be the trend follower.
Right. You can talk about how some of those readers that you interviewed ended up informing some of your work. Are there any standouts that you remember that really had an impact on you? Some of the lives that those people were relaying?
Yeah, actually, Kara, who is the main character through all of the books, is based on a friend of mine who I got to know several years ago. She was going through a divorce and had a young son and was kind of struggling, and she and I struck up a friendship. We had known each other through business for quite a while, but we struck up a friendship. And so, she talked about, what if this happened and what if this happened? And so we just joked about it, and I was writing, I was actually crafting a story for National Novel Writing Month, which I've done every November for 10 years or so, 11 years. And I said, well, I'll use your story. And she's like, oh, okay, that's fine. And so I did that. And I, of course, edited. It took about 6 or 8 months to edit the story the first time, change things around, and then figure out what I really wanted it to be. But the main character is my friend, who is now, she just moved a couple miles away from me. And we laugh about that all the time. People are like, this is fiction, right? And I said, of course it is, but it's based on real people.
Based on a true story.
Yeah.
How long was that original excerpt that you were going to submit, and how did that then turn into the idea to launch that book series that you're working on?
It's funny. I always imagined that I was going to write, like literary fiction or historical type of things. I actually have a couple of manuscripts that are finished that I sent out, I queried out, but they didn't quite get past the initial edit phase. I got some nice feedback from them and so forth, but I said, well, let's just try something completely off the wall. And I like reading fantasy. I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan and C.S. Lewis and of course Tolkien. But I never imagined that I would write that kind of stuff. And I said, well, what's it going to hurt? It's National Novel Writing Month. This stuff never goes anywhere. It just sits on the computer and it feeds your brain. But my friend asked if she could see the story, and so we talked about it, and I let her read it, and she was like, this is really good. And so I said, all right, well, let's see where this goes. And sure enough, I sent out several queries, and people were like, well, we're really not sure how to categorize this. And I said, well, it's fantasy. And they're like, yeah, but it's more, it's got a lot of spiritual aspects to it. So I looked up spiritual fantasy, and C.S. Lewis is actually on that list. And I thought I was in good company there. So I repackaged it and submitted it to a couple of publishers as spiritual fantasy, and one of them bit. And so I sent it out, and I had a huge following with the first book. And I realized, okay, there's more to this story than just one book. So I just kept it going, and it keeps feeding itself. It's a really fun series to write because it just, possibilities open up and educational opportunities open up. And I get to do a lot of research, which I love to do.
When was that first book published, and how long do you usually take between the books that have come out so far? You said you're on the 7th in the series right now? Yep.
The first one came out in 2012. I had written it in 2010, so it took a year and a half really to get that one out. And each one now takes me about, I start writing one before the next one comes out, so the next one in the series. So I started writing book 7 when book 6 was in the publishing process. So it takes me about 14 to 16 months to write each one. That includes editing and sending it through beta readers and making sure that all the facts are checked and so forth, because it does include a lot of factual information, even though it is fantasy. I like to include things that people will learn about, so things that they wouldn't normally pursue themselves. And so I have to go back and fact check and make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that people don't look one way or speak one way in the first chapter and change by the end or something like that. That could really trip people up. So about 14 to 16 months for each one.
So when you're working with those new themes and trying to put the factual information in, are there any in your mind currently that you've been working with that are sort of have your attention at the moment?
Yeah, I actually have this one character who's been in the back of my mind for a while, and she showed up in this book, in book 7, and her name has been elusive until just recently, and she's a climatologist who does work in Antarctica. To talk about, what the changes are that are going on in the environment and so forth. But through her work as a scientist, she's been asked to talk in front of environmental groups in countries all over the world. And so she has decided to run for political office in the U.S.
Okay.
So, yeah, she's just kind of this really like a mashup character, but she's like brilliant. So she's been fun to write so far.
I always wonder with novel writers, especially when you get into a series with all these characters, do they occupy your mind? Do you become the different characters throughout the day? Are you able to compartmentalize it as you're writing?
I don't become the characters at all. They are their own entities, and they talk to me. So, yeah, they occupy my mind a lot. It really becomes difficult when I'm driving home. I teach at Kennesaw State a couple days a week, and so when I'm on 575 coming home, I'm like, not now. Talk to me in about 45 minutes, because we don't need to crowd up my head while I'm sitting in traffic. Something will happen, and I'll go, oh, this would be a perfect situation for so-and-so. And so I'll jot it down. I always keep a notebook with me. And so when I see something that reminds me of one of them, and I test it out, I let them kind of play with it in the story. And if they don't fit with that particular scenario, then of course it gets edited out. But you have to give them room to play, and that's what I enjoy doing. I think that's one of the most fun things about novel writing, is that I get to play with these people who live in my head and give them space to live on the page.
Yeah, they're taking you on a journey at the same time that you're following them almost.
Absolutely.
Where the road may wind next.
That's right. I said I gave birth to actually, two physical children, and I feel like I've given birth to a whole lot more kids through, ink on the page than I could ever have imagined. But it's kind of the same process. You have to birth these characters. They don't come fully formed. They come out as like little blobs, like you when you have a baby, and this is weird, but you learn more about them as they've come out of your head and they're living on the page. You learn more about them and they become more fully formed.
No, that definitely makes sense. On that train of thought, do you get emotionally attached to them if you have to do something maybe that's not so wonderful to them in the story, or something bad happens? Does it weigh on you?
Oh yeah. I've cried. I've bitten my nails. I'm like, why are you doing this? That's a stupid thing to do. But I think that, Stephen King always says, kill your darlings. And what he meant was actually the little snippets of literature that you think are profound or something. Be able to cut those out because, what's profound to you is probably going to be overwhelming to the writer. But I also view it as, killing those people off or being really cruel to my characters, because nobody wants to read about, happy-go-lucky all the time. If we don't put them through, some sort of torture, there's really nothing to read about. So, yeah, it's difficult to do, but, it's the stuff probably that every parent wants to do their children when they're misbehaving. So you can take it out in your writing.
Right. A cathartic process to the end.
Absolutely, yes. And my kids are adults now. They're both in their 20s, so, I look at them and I'm like, gosh, if only I had this tool when you guys were little, I could have written all these scenarios, and, that way I wouldn't be an abuser. I wasn't an abuser. But they turned out okay. Both of them turned out okay.
Look at these pent-up frustrations that you made me wait all this time to...
Absolutely, yeah.
So what is your typical writing schedule like when it comes to the book series and other freelance projects that you do? Are you able to compartmentalize those, or
yeah, I have a production calendar, and I always make time for myself. My minimum is 500 words a day, which is really small in the grand scheme. When I don't have a whole lot of outside projects going on, it's more like 1,500 to 2,000 words a day. And it just, I'm not one of those people who just like dies by word count. I know a lot of folks are like, oh, I've got to write X number of words a day. If I get a minimum of 500, which takes me about 30 minutes, I feel like, in a particularly busy day where I'm working on freelance clients, that's actually pretty good. But there's some days when, I don't believe that you have to sit in front of the computer and make your eyes bleed until something comes out. If it's not coming, I'm not going to force it, because that's not going to be any good anyway.
Right, you're going to have to scratch it. And,
yeah.
So wait for that
I'll
inspiration.
write something, and I journal every day, and the journaling really helps because that gets some of that garbage out of my head, and it does help me compartmentalize the different aspects of my writing career. So, there's some days I know I'm going to be enormously busy writing for clients, and that's usually the early part of the week. And then I teach classes on Monday nights, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. So those days, it's a lot of being in my brain and interacting with other people, and I'm an introvert, so I need time to, rejuice, rejuvenate, right. And so, I'll come home, and a lot of times that's when the characters will talk to me, is after a long day like that.
I think that journaling is such an important aspect, too. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't always remember my dreams, but whenever I do, I try to make it a point first thing in the morning to write my dreams down just as a journaling exercise, because it seems to get those gears turning sort of as a trigger first thing in the morning. That's one of my prompts, that then when you do sit down or have to write something, you've already sort of primed the wheel first thing in the morning, and so it might come a little bit easier is something I've found for myself.
Exactly.
We all have our own little paths that we follow, that tricks to the trade that we found for ourselves. I was wondering, when the magic really hits and you're there writing, are there any particular days that stand out of just marathon writing sessions where just huge chunks of the story suddenly materialize?
Calling it a marathon writing session is entirely appropriate, because there are days when I've written more words than I can imagine. Like I'll come up with 10 or 12 pages, and I'll look at where I was when I started that day, and I'm going, oh my gosh, and I'll get up to go, grab something to eat or refill my water or something, and I just feel like I have run a marathon. My body aches, and it's a physical thing, when that much is coming out of your brain, it's a physical thing. So yeah, there have been some really cool days, like when I'm trying to, finish up a novel and I know where it's going to go, and I wrap things up, and then I always have to put something in there, a cliffhanger, because I've got 11 books that I'm writing in this series. So, I can't really wrap everything up in, book 5, 6, or 7. There's got to be something that leads into the next one. And I know what that is, and it's so much fun to write. So, yeah, those become really exciting, but they do wear you out.
How much of the process is going on the journey as it comes, and how much do you have sort of those cliffhangers that you already know? Like, do you know how the series is ultimately going to end, or is that still a surprise to you?
Oh no, I know how the series is going to end, and I'm working towards that. But the fun thing is that I don't know exactly everything that's going to happen in each book. I think I would lose interest if I did it that way. I'm not in fiction writing, there are fiction pantsers and fiction plotters, and the plotters are the people who have, these enormous outlines. J.K. Rowling was one of those. She had, these yellow pads that had every character and these scenarios and where everybody fit in and everything, and that's wonderful. She had a great series with that. I can't do that. I need surprise. I love the element of surprise, and some of my favorite characters have shown up, and they weren't who I imagined they would be, and they've turned out to be some of the best ones. And other, my readers have said, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. I love this character. So, now I'm like, okay, great. I've got to write that character more because they're just fun.
Yeah, you're like, I didn't see it coming either. It was
yeah, exactly. I have one writer or reader who called me in and said she actually came to a book signing, and she's like, how long did you have this one in your pocket? And I was like, about 30 seconds.
Absolutely. And it seems like leaving it open more to spontaneously arise that way also allows the synchronicities of life and what's going on at the moment to sort of filter through, and might seem to make life more interesting in that regard as well, just because you're constantly searching for the next step that someone's going to take. Right. Yeah, because you can't tell them what to do. It's like telling your kids what to do. I need you to clean your room. Okay, and they do it like 6 weeks later. If I say something, my kid, you have to do this, you have to do this, they don't do it, but they come back around. I actually have I like to tell this story because she's still the one that I dislike the most of all my characters, but she just is such a pivotal person. And she showed up in the end of the second book. And I said, this is not your scene. You don't belong here. I don't know who you are. And she's like, just shut up and write me. I'm going to be here. And I was like, all right, whatever. I'll write you out in the editing. And she's like, oh, no, you won't. And book 3 is all about her. But her name is Harmony. And it's funny because she is total discord. Like everything she touches turns to chaos. So I just love that her name is Harmony, because I was like, I don't know what her name is. She's this bimbo, and I just don't like her. She's so shallow and everything else. And she says, well, I'm Harmony. And I was like, of course you are. Coup d'etat she took to get into the series, force her way in. Oh, yeah. And nobody really likes her. None of the characters, they're all just so agitated by her, and I think that's what you need somebody, kind of like, that's why they have an agitator in a washing machine. It spins everything around, it makes things happen. That's what she does. That's her job in the story, is to be the agitator. Well, the bringer of chaos to explore new territories, break down the
Definitely.
patterns. Maybe talk a little bit about more of the general theme of what the series is about, and maybe where people can find more information about it and purchase the books.
Sure. Okay, well, so this always cracks me up when people ask me that, because they're like, really? It's a bunch of normal, everyday women and their guardians who are male friends or who they're in relationships with, but the women are the main characters, and they're, like Kara's a CPA, and Harmony is, in this series, she's a barista, but she's been, she worked in Hollywood for a while. And Karen owns a coffee shop in Crabapple, Georgia, which I thought it's just fun. And so all these women have normal. There's a doctor. There's a chaplain who did some time as she worked in South America. And worked with groups that were going in to build churches and schools and stuff like that. And so, everybody has a little bit of a different path, but it's normal, everyday kind of people. And the one thing that they have in common is that they're dragons. So their spirit energy is dragon. And it was so cool because it came about. I love the idea of all these energy lines that create all the spiritual center, or that connect all the spiritual centers of the earth, and they're called ley lines, L-E-Y, ley lines. And ley actually translates to dragon. So the dragon lines bind the earth. So, the series is all about how these women come together throughout time when earth needs to be rebalanced. And so that's why they're coming together this time. It's really it's fun to do, and that you can use current events, and you can use things that are of concern, and highlight those, but also tie it into history, throughout history. How these women came together. And so I like to tie in different religious beliefs, and different locations throughout the world. And bring in a little bit of history of those, because I actually, when I was in college, I took a few archaeology classes and geology classes, and I thought, if this journalism thing doesn't work out, I'd love to be a paleontologist,
Cool. It is amazing how those ley lines, how people were connected to them so primally and could pick up on energy back, however, thousands of years ago, and have built all these stone monuments right on top of them, just all across the world, how they all connect. So that's a really cool theme to sort of have as the foundation, realigning those.
Yeah, it's been fun, and since I love that anyway, and then you find out things about, and Craig, my husband, is like, when are we going to get to go on field trips, like all around the world, to see these places you're writing about?
Right.
Well, when I sell a few more books, honey.
Talking about the idea of traveling, what are some of the events that you attend, or festivals that you've been able to present at or attend and talk about your books at?
My first book, actually, was the first two books. I was invited through the Atlanta Writers Club to take part in the Emerging Authors at Decatur Book Festival in 2013. So that was a lot of fun. I got to talk and meet a whole bunch of people. Didn't sell a whole lot of books, but I saw a spike in my online sales after that. So that was pretty cool. And then I did the Milton Literary Festival this past year, and I've presented to private book clubs where they've had me come in. All the members have read it, and they've had me come in. And this year, I applied to be in Dahlonega this year, but I haven't gotten the approval on that one yet. So I'm hoping. I'm actually going to attend Dahlonega. I'm just not going to necessarily be a panelist. But I continually submit so that I can be part of different events, because the more people who know about you, the better it is. And, of course, I presented at a novel idea before I took that on. I was one of the emerging authors at Foxtail Bookshop twice. different books in the series before I took that project on too. So, people get to know me. Yeah.
Very cool. How did you get to be involved? You said that you read at the event before they asked you to come and host it, but as far as a novel idea is concerned, how's that experience been for you so far, and what is the future in 2019 looking for that as far as venues where it will appear?
Right now we're at Peach and the Pork Chop in Roswell, right going into Crabapple, and we're there through February. And then in March, I've got a couple of locations pending, so I'm hoping to wrap those up by the end of the next week. What I'd love to have is, a continuous location throughout the year, but I realize that for, restaurants and small businesses, that's really hard to commit to for an entire year. So as long as we're in the same general area, we'll continue to, publicize that. And I just want to know it, about a month or two in advance so that we can make sure that the best turnout, the best number of people comes out to listen to the authors. But the restaurants have been surprised by the number of folks who actually come out, because they said they've had, book clubs come in before and so forth. And this is not a book club. This is a literary dinner theater. And it was started by Marcia Cornelius, and she retired in November and sent out this mass email to, she handpicked several people who had participated and had event planning experience. And she said, if anybody is interested in taking this on, please send me an email and we'll figure out who wants to do this. And I sent an email thinking I was going to be one of many, and I was one of one. So I got to take it on. But it's been really fun. Probably the most challenging thing is, and the most stressful part of it is just making sure that we have a venue that's going to be able to handle all of our attendees on a regular basis.
Yeah, I can imagine organizing and trying to make sure all those details are in place. It's tough
But
job.
the authors are wonderful, and they're so supportive, and they really enjoy the opportunity. You took part in it last month, and it's fun to reach new people. And because we don't necessarily have a single genre, it's nice to be able to reach new audience for each of the readers. People who, like for you, we had 2 poets there last month, and people who don't normally read poetry or think that they like poetry were blown away by what poetry is, So I think you got some new readers.
Yeah, that was a great event. The other poet you're talking about, Jason Rodenbeck, actually, that was the first time I had met him there at that event. He's going to be coming up on a show with me in May on the 11th.
Oh, wonderful.
So, looking forward to
good.
talking to him some more. And that's what I love about the Atlanta scene, just the connections that are made, and seems to be a lot of great events going on. Coincidentally, I was just walking through the living room a little while earlier, and there was a Super Bowl special about Atlanta on, and they were featuring Peach and the Pork Chop on there.
Oh, fantastic.
I thought that was pretty cool.
That's
it was
great.
Definitely a nice restaurant.
Yeah.
So you do the novel idea there, and then you've also got some new workshops I saw some promotions for here recently coming up at the Foxtail. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you do with those classes, what people can expect to learn, and maybe how they can sign up to get involved?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the Foxtail classes, actually, it's funny, we talked about the first class that I ever taught there was Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones, and that was in 2010, I think, and maybe it was 2009. Anyway, we're doing that one again starting on February 11th, Monday evenings for 8 weeks, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So they can go on foxtailbookshop.com and go under the classes and workshops and just sign up there. There's a link, and they can sign up online. There's also a week from today, the 9th, is a 3-hour boot camp, which a lot of folks say, oh, I'd love to sign up for a writing class, but I can't commit to 8 weeks. I've got these things going on. And I said, okay, that's great. If you can sign up for a 3-hour workshop, would you do that? And they said yes. And so about, I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago, we started doing Saturday 3-hour workshops. And it's just, we call it boot camp because people are exhausted by the time they're done and their hands are numb from writing so much. But we do probably between 20 and 30 different prompts in 3 hours, and everybody writes for 5 or so minutes, and then we read, and then we go through a little bit of instruction, and then we throw another prompt at them, and we just do that for 3 hours. And it's great for people who are just starting to write because they don't understand where ideas come from a lot of times, where they have an idea and they just don't know how to extract it from their heads. And the boot camp allows them to know that they can start something. And then I have a lot of writers who are in the middle of a book, but they're in that mushy area in the middle where there's it's quicksand and they're not sure they're going to be able to see the end of the book. And so they come to the boot camp to just kind of rejuvenate their stories. And I've got folks who have come to just about everyone I've ever held. So they're really helpful.
Sounds like more of those writing marathons we were talking about earlier. It
yeah,
really is,
exactly. Though. When I leave, I'm like, I go home and I'm like, I need chocolate,
Well, it is. Breaking the muscle down is very fatiguing. It can be.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
What else is going on right now as far as your writing is concerned, and any exciting projects that you have on your mind, and what's the overall sort of aspiration here in 2019 and beyond?
Well, I dubbed it the year of the book. On New Year's Day, I said this is going to be the year of the book. And so I've got a couple of really cool projects coming up. And it's not just my books. It's my students as well. Students that I've had for years and some that I haven't even met yet. I have a couple of new locations. So I've been teaching at Kennesaw State in the OLLI program, which is the lifelong learners. So you have to be 50 or over to take the classes, which is a lot of fun. And I'm teaching 3 classes there right now. And we'll start another bunch of classes in April over there. And then I have a new location in Roswell as well on Tuesday nights from 6 to 7:30. I'm teaching an 8-week soul coaching class. And Denise Lynn, it's based on Denise Lynn's book, Soul Coaching. And it's a way to kind of clear out all the cobwebs from your own psyche. We tend to psych ourselves out and become overwhelmed, and this book really helps people kind of get out of their own way so that they can be more creative. And so that one actually starts next Tuesday night, the 5th, in Roswell. And then I have a big project that I'm looking at working on. I want to do a large-scale writing workshop with 50 people in one location for 3 or 4 hours, and I'm working on securing a location for that in July. And so that's coming up this year. And I also have some nifty projects. I've been working on a memoir for about 7 years, and I've decided this has to be the year that it comes out. So I've got a lot of pieces of that, and I just have to figure out how to put all the pieces together. It's dumping out the jigsaw puzzle box and putting them all together now. So I'm hoping that one will be out early next year.
So that memoir is taking a look at your own life?
Yeah, I'm a horseback rider. Yeah, I'm a horseback rider, and I've been riding since I was 12. And when I was 14 years old, I was at a barn taking lessons, and this 3-month-old horse came in, and I bonded with her instantly. And my parents ultimately wound up buying her for me when we moved to Georgia, and I trained her myself, and I had her for 32 years. She passed away in my arms. And so I learned so much from her about, what's important and about how to trust and, all these interesting things. And so I after she passed away, on my Twitter feed at the time, I did a daily little tweet called Lessons from My Horse, and it was just this little short thing. And when I ended that, people actually wrote to me and said, hey, where are all the lessons? And I went, oh, well, I've got followers for this. So I started compiling all of those and putting them together in book form. So that will be coming out. There's so many life lessons that you can learn from different aspects of your own life. And for me, it was my horse. And I actually wound up, I said, I'm never going to do this again. And I wound up buying my horse's cousin, who was 3 weeks old at the time that I bought her. She's about to turn 5. And I trained her as well with the help of a trainer because I'm older now. And I always said I broke a horse when I was 15 and I could break a hip now. So I needed some help this time. Yeah. So that's what I'm working on as far as my memoir goes. And then I have a couple of other little side projects that I will be unveiling on my website in March and April. So as soon as those become available, if folks are interested, they can become part of the know, the folks in the know. And my website is BethHermes.com. Yeah, get in the loop. Yep. It's BethHermes.com. It's really hard.
Right. So, yeah, that's a great tribute, it sounds like, to what was your first horse's name?
Brat. I didn't name her, but she was one. Yeah, she was amazing. And I mean, it's funny because you think you're going to have forever with someone, whether it be an animal or a person or whatever, a job, and you take things for granted. And like when I had my kids, of course, my horse kind of got put a little bit on the back burner, and then I was working like a crazy woman trying to keep things going, and my husband and I were working separate shifts just to make sure that the kids were taken care of and the bills were paid and everything. And so there was a period of time there where I didn't spend as much time as I wanted to, and then she started getting older and going downhill, and I felt horribly guilty about that. So I'm not letting that happen this time. I spend a lot of time with my little one that I have now.
What else are you doing there on the farm? Do you plant foods there as well as raising the animals?
Yes. I'm in charge of the animals, and my husband is in charge of the plants for the most part. But last year we didn't really get to do. It was our first year here last year, and so settling in and getting things all settled. And then my mom was sick last year, so I was helping her recover. So this year my plan is I'm going to do the herb garden, and my husband bought me bee boxes for my birthday last year, so we're ordering our bees, and we're going to be beekeepers as well, so that'll be cool.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. I've been to a couple of beekeeping seminars, and it is so incredibly peaceful to do that. And I'm sure, there's going to be stings and so forth, because people are like, aren't you afraid? And I'm like, they're bees. It's not like, no, it's not bad. As long as you don't do something stupid, they're fine. They'll accept you. But I'm really looking forward to it, because there is absolutely nothing like honey that is dripping through the screen in the sunlight. It's the best tasting honey you'll ever have.
Sounds amazing. If you start selling it, put me down for a jar immediately. I'll be
you
happy
got
to
it.
take some of that off your hands. Well, Beth, this has flown by. We're coming down to the last minute here.
Wow.
So thank you for coming on, and it's been great learning about your work and the Lightbearer series. So I guess here in the last final minute, if there's any closing words you want to leave the audience.
No, I thank you so much for having me on here. I was thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about for an hour? But yeah, it really was easy and it flew. So thanks. And if anybody's interested in spiritual fantasy series, look up the Lightbearers books. They're online. You can Google and purchase them online, or support your local bookstore, local independent bookstores. That's what I really always push is, you can order them through your local independent bookstore, and that keeps the local businesses in business.
Absolutely. Hear to that. I second it. That's so important. Just say,
Definitely.
Everyone, please go check out BethHermes.com. And Beth, I hope you have a great evening and weekend ahead. And thanks so much for joining me here tonight. Great talking with you.
Take care. You too. Thanks, Scott. Good night.
Good night.
Taraji P. Henson. In my new movie, What Men Want, I could hear men's thoughts.
On February 6th, catch a special Girls' Night Out screening of the movie critics are calling outrageously funny. The must-see comedy.
I wouldn't miss it for the world. Amazing!
Taraji P. Henson, Tracy Morgan.
If you only knew what I was thinking right now.
Trust me, we don't want to know.
What Men Want. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parents. Girls' Night Out screenings Wednesday, February 6th. In theaters everywhere, February 8th.